Welcome back to Fountain Avenue Dishes. I am Ann Fulton. I'm here today with registered dietitian Emily Russo, and our guest is a pediatrician, and we are going to talk about all things food, nutrition, and more as they specifically relate to kids. We have a really fun discussion lined up, so let's dig in. I am so excited to welcome our guest today. It is Dr. Pia Fenimore. She's been a pediatrician for over 25 years. She's a partner with Lancaster Pediatrics. She is the chief of pediatrics at Penn Medicine Lancaster General Health. She has been deeply involved in her community, specifically with firearm safety. She is the mother of two boys. She was the pediatrician for my two boys from the time they were babies until they aged out of pediatrics. She, full disclosure, I can't remember ever meeting Pia because I have known her since we were babies. So we have some, I think, little fun things to sprinkle into this discussion along the way. But mostly, we're going to be talking about her perspective on food, nutrition, diet, weight loss, social media, how all of these things affect kids today. And we're just really excited to have this discussion. So welcome, Pia.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be here with you guys.
It is really great to have you here. And because we'd like to start out, well, a little fun, we're going to do some just quick rapid fire questions.
Great.
So we can get to know you a little bit better. Okay. So what is your favorite vegetable?
Brussels sprouts.
I like Brussels sprouts too. What is your least favorite?
Tomatoes.
What is your favorite candy?
Well, I love candy. We'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes, I know that.
But my favorite candy is raspberry sour gummy bottles that they sell at Swedish store on Queen Street.
In all these years, I thought it was Swedish fish.
Yes, I've graduated to those.
Okay.
I've become a little more sophisticated.
Learn something new every day.
But Swedish fish is my second favorite.
Do you have a least favorite candy?
I don't like when they spoil chocolate by putting fruit in it.
Oh, yeah. I agree with that. What is your favorite board game?
We played a lot of board games in my house. But probably if I had to pick a favorite, I would pick Clue because I like the classics.
The classics are good.
We play a lot of the new ones, too.
You just introduced me to a game called So Clover.
Very fun.
For anybody who likes Connections, the daily word game, it's a fun one. That's a good one. What book are you reading right now?
I am reading a book called Future Boy, which was written by Michael J. Fox, and it's about a very specific time frame in the 80s when he was filming a show that hardly anyone remembers, but called Family Ties. And
who doesn't remember Family Ties?
And then at night he was filming a movie that everyone knows, which is Back to the Future. So he was sleeping like 4 hours a day and doing both of these things at the ripe old age of like 22 or something like that. And it was a crazy time both in the world and for him personally. And he's just telling fabulous stories from that time period. So that's what I'm reading.
Oh, that's a good recommendation.
Because I'm an 80s girl, so, you know.
Me too. Yep. I'm going to add that one to my list. If you had a personal theme song, what would it be?
We talk about that a lot in my house, too, because we all have walk-up songs. Like if you were on a baseball team and they played music before you came up to hit. So mine is Lose Yourself by Eminem.
I like that. And you know what I remember you telling me?
I'm just picturing Pia walking up to the baseball diamond.
Yeah. I remember years ago you telling me you listened to Eminem. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And she's like, I listen to all music that the kids are listening to now because she wants to be able to relate. And I love that. So even if you didn't personally love the music, you like Eminem.
Yes, I try to listen to all genres and get to know all popular musicians because I like to be able to talk to my patients about it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you tipped me off on a couple more questions that we thought listeners would be interested in, and I particularly appreciate these. What is your favorite body fluid?
Oh, my favorite body fluid is definitely blood.
And what is
so many fun and exciting things, and it doesn't really have an odor.
What is your least favorite body fluid?
Vomit. The odor of vomit makes me vomit. So I can handle pee, I can handle poop, I can handle bile, all of those things. But vomit, I usually need to leave the room.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Okay, so now we'll get a little more serious. Of all the medical specialties, what made you choose pediatrics?
So when I went to medical school, I knew from the start that I wanted to be a pediatrician because I've always loved working with kids. As a teenager, I was always babysitting, that kind of thing. I grew up, my father was a pediatrician, so I knew a lot about what the job entailed. And I just really love working with children. I also really like the focus on prevention because in addition to having a healthy child, we're also slowly trying to form a healthy adult. And that's a dynamic that I really enjoy talking to parents about, talking to kids about, and how it's really the only specialty that is so future-minded.
Yeah, thinking about that too, I feel like with nutrition, that goes hand in hand a lot of times with prevention. And I know what I am frequently asked when it comes to food and food concerns that parents have about their kids. What do you feel like are the most common questions or concerns that parents ask you about nutrition and their kids growing up?
So I get a lot of questions about picky eaters. It's very stressful for parents when their children are picky eaters. These questions usually show up way earlier than you would think they would, like 12 months, 15 months. They start to ask about, I'm worried that she's limiting herself too much or things like that. And it's interesting because as a pediatrician, I'm really trained to keep my focus on growth. Mm-hmm. And while a wide range of foods is a very important thing, also from a developmental standpoint, the number one focus that we look at is growth. So my first answer is always, hey, your child's nicely balanced between height and weight. She's growing well. I don't think we have a major problem. And then we kind of move into some of the ways that picky eating can show up as a developmental problem. So average for a toddler is to eat around 20 to 30 foods, which isn't that many. And so a lot of parents, once they hear those numbers, they're like, oh, okay, well, we're good, So I try to really just to reassure parents and let them know that picky eating, while it's a good thing to talk about and it's a good thing to think about, it's something that usually a lot of different factors play into it, and there's lots of different ways that you can move your child through it. But it's not something that parents need to lose sleep over.
It's something you told me when one of my children was a toddler and didn't want to eat a lot of things. You asked about milk consumption because he really liked milk. And you pointed out to me that he could very well be drinking his necessary calories in a day in milk. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the number of calories at, 18 months, 2 years that a child needs. And it's not a lot. So I thought, okay, if you're drinking whole milk, that, and being able to moderate that helped. So that was something I never would have considered. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of just a little light bulb, like, oh, okay.
It's kind of a mean thing we do to parents because in the beginning of life, we push the milk, how many ounces a day, how many times is the baby nursing? Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about milk, and then all of a sudden the baby turns 1 and we put them on whole milk, and we really flip the switch on them and sort of say, okay, now you really want to make sure they're not drinking too much milk because that's very filling and can limit their appetite for other stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously when kids, toddlers, young children, parents are driving most of the questions. As these children become young adolescents and teenagers, do you get a lot of questions from them as they get older in terms of weight, body size, diet? There's so many things that we talk about on social media these days. Mm-hmm. Do you tend to hear more from the parents, questions from the parents or the kids, or is it pretty equal as they get older?
I would say that specific questions about weight or growth tend to mostly be from parents, but I get a lot of body image questions from teenagers.
What are the concerns these days?
They want to be more muscly. They don't like that they have a little ring of fat around their waist. It's usually something very specific that teenagers have decided, I don't like my neck. I don't like my, and it's always challenging because the first thing that you want everyone to think about is how do I how do I get this child or this teenager feeling good about themselves? And sometimes the answer is to help them to change something. Sometimes the answer is to just reassure them that they're okay. And, it's really, it requires a lot of listening and a lot of dialogue. And sometimes I kick the parents out of the room for that because however the parents feel about their own body or their own body image issues can often reflect and affect the child. So sometimes I try to remove that force. But mostly it's all about listening and kind of addressing their concerns. I tend to really avoid numerical discussions like, oh, you are 2 pounds over average, or I don't get into that kind of thing at all. I really focus on how healthy they are and what their concerns about their body are.
Mm-hmm. And what happens when you're in the room like that and you've scheduled time for an appointment, whether it's like a general checkup or you don't think it's something that's going to take particularly long. And here you are in a very big moment, with your patient. How do you handle that time-wise? And when do you say this deserves more time? Like, this is how we're going to manage this? Yeah.
So it's always tricky because on average I have about 15 minutes per patient, which is not very much, and there's a lot to cover. In a teenager visit, we cover everything from growth and body image and weight to safety with driving to sports physical questions to mental health. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's important to really make sure you address those questions, preferably in the moment. So what I will often do is try to start with their biggest concern. And that way we can spend the most time on that. And if we don't get to the other things, then I can circle back later and we can either do that virtually or we can schedule another appointment or things like that. But I try to never send people out the door not feeling like I didn't get my question answered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you made a comment about, oftentimes it's parents modeling certain behavior. And I think of some feedback that I've gotten from my nieces in terms of discussions in the school cafeteria, and at a very young age, certain girls saying they were on a diet and so forth. So how can parents and grandparents, because there are a lot of grandparents that are highly involved with in their grandchildren's lives, how can we as grandparents and parents set a better example? And we want to set boundaries, right, as a parent, but how do we know we're going far enough or too far?
Well, the first thing is to just look at how you're modeling and what you're showing your children and your grandchildren, because, what we do matters actually more than what we say. And so I always sort of say to the parents, are you exercising? Are you eating healthy? What's your go-to on a bad day to eat? Is it McDonald's? Is it a protein bar? Like, what's your kind of go-to? And because really the research is very, very convincing that if you want people to change their behaviors, specifically pediatric patients, the whole house needs to change. And that can be very tricky sometimes because maybe the whole house doesn't have whatever problem you're trying to address. But if the child feels like they're being singled out or picked on, or really the whole house has to rearrange, everything around the child's eating, that dynamic is a recipe for failure. So I first of all really encourage parents and grandparents to model healthy eating, model positive body image, do the things that make you feel good about yourself. If you're somebody that loves having your hair dyed, go get your hair dyed. If you're somebody who really feels good if you go to the gym every day, please go to the gym every day. Do the things that make you confident and feel good about yourself, and then share that with your child and sort of say, well, I do this because I've learned that this is me and this is how I feel myself the best. So the modeling thing is key. Boundaries are key. I talk a lot about this, and I try to be very open because I know that people are dealing with a lot of obstacles to this, but family dinner matters so much. And it doesn't even need to be family dinner, family meals. just time to sit together, to eat together, to kind of have touch points with each other around food, because the research is very convincing that not only does that make a child more likely to have healthy eating habits, but they're less likely to have depression, anxiety, to feel disconnected from their support system. It's just really critical. So I really try to push the family dinner thing.
That was always really important to me as well. And especially as kids get older, it becomes harder to carve out that time because activities and things seem to always be over dinner time. But I always felt like it was our best time to come together and talk about the day and really communicate. You said something to me about, because a lot of people will have their screens, a phone, an iPad, maybe entertaining a child at dinner. What are your thoughts on that? There was, in terms of what one should have at the table or not have at the table?
So Emily, I'm sure, has even more to say about this, but I will say that statistically, I don't think it's an accident that our pediatric obesity rates started to really skyrocket around the time that screens and tablets and things became easily accessible to everybody, but specifically to children. And there's lots of other things that play into to those statistics, but there's no question that watching a screen while you're eating not only disconnects you from the people that you're sitting near, but it disconnects you from your food and what you're eating, because you're just thinking about whatever you're scrolling through. Mm-hmm. And it also really affects our eating habits depending on what we're watching. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why advertisers pay thousands of dollars to advertise during the group of people that they're targeting's preferred shows and preferred videos and things like that. So you become very vulnerable to those kind of things.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because if I have time at the end of the day to sit down and watch a TV show, that is when I want to snack and have like a bowl of ice cream, comfort food. Like, is it just because we're stopping and slowing down? Is it because we're watching something?
And it's a treat. Yeah. Everything about it is a treat. You're watching your favorite show. You get to eat a treat. You get to sit down. Mm-hmm. And for, the three of us and for most moms, that's such a treat in itself. So I think that's perfectly fine, but I think it can't replace everything else that's so important.
Emily, do you have a perspective on that from your with your dietitian hat on?
Yeah, I thought maybe we could go back a little bit to what you were saying, because I think there's this really tricky area that I talk a lot with parents about when they have concerns. A lot of times, nutrition-related concerns, whether it's, like you said, picky eater, which we could talk about. Maybe that's a misnomer. Maybe it's more age-appropriate selectiveness, it sounds like, from our pediatrician who says that. When you're talking about being selective and you're talking about it in front of the kids, and either you and your partner or a grandparent are having disagreements about it, how that can be really confusing. And also, too, if you're commenting or having feelings about yourself and whether or not you're, quote unquote, on the right track, for instance, like, oh, I haven't been to the gym in a while, I'm being really bad, I need to go do that. So sometimes it's negative self-talk, or like, oh, I'm eating too many desserts, or like, oh, I feel fat. There is this fine line between like sharing what makes you feel good while also not like putting that on a child. So I don't know if you have any like examples of language that you would suggest around that.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, I think it's really important when we talk about modeling behavior for kids. We also need to not model the negativity and things like that. It's fine to say, oh, I haven't been to the gym in a week, I really need to get back there because I enjoy going, but not because I can feel my body getting fat. Mm-hmm. So, I think we really need to share with kids why we do things, and we need to be in touch with, that saying, know thyself. Like, you need to be in touch with why you do things. Why do you go to the gym? Do you hate every second of it? Well, maybe you shouldn't be going to the gym. Maybe you should be playing pickleball or something else, So I think it's really important that we kind of get in touch with our relationships with food, our relationships with physical activity, all of those things that we're going to convey onto our kids so that we don't convey any type of negativity.
Yes, and just acknowledging how tough that is and how we can all make mistakes in our language, and we have opportunities to try again. But there is a really tricky balance, and I feel like a lot of times perhaps why parents are asking you about their kids' eating habits at such an alarmingly early age that there's the stress about that. It's because there is so much stress and emphasis put on nutrition that it's hard to not care so much about like your one tiny little being and what they're eating or not eating. And so minimizing that stress is almost just as important as reinforcing what's important about nutrition. And that can be a really tricky line, I'm sure, for you to walk.
Absolutely. And the massive amounts of information that come this way too, whether it be from social media or their Aunt Susie. It doesn't matter, where it comes from. But parents have to take all that in and then process it and figure out what's the best thing for their child. So I do try to be that sounding board and sort of say, well, that's great that your Aunt Susie started her kids' day with, cider vinegar every morning. I don't think you need to do that, and here's why. And so I do spend a lot of time kind of debunking myths.
Well, I think short of having a crystal ball, which clearly none of us have, we all want the best for our children. Yeah. And I think it's easy to feel like, well, this could be a slippery slope. If I give them this, it might turn into that. And am I creating a problem? And I guess you're sort of the voice of reason to say that it's probably all going to be just fine.
Yes, and to sort of tell parents, like, don't try to do things that are contrary to who you are. I mean, I think I just told you my favorite food practically is candy, which is like a horrible thing. My dentist yells at me every time I go. But my children grew up with easy access to candy because I knew that they were going to see me eat it. And so we dealt with that in a, everything in moderation, can never replace the healthy stuff, that kind of thing. But I think, had I tried to sort of, be sneaking my candy while my kids aren't searching, I think that's not congruent with what we want our kids to get to a point where, I eat candy. Yes, my dentist gets a little frustrated with me, but for the most part, I'm a pretty healthy human. And I've figured out how to incorporate some of my little needs in life and my joys.
And I'm the same way with ice cream.
Yeah.
So we celebrate ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream in my family. Yeah. But I have a comment and a question as a follow-up to that. The comment, as someone who's known you for a long time, I also know that you've planted a garden. So I know that you do things, it's balance, right? Mm-hmm. So as much as you're exposing them to Swedish fish and gummy bears, it's butternut squash, and which I know is another one of your favorite vegetables.
That is my
Brussels sprouts.
Close first. I don't know.
But that's an important moment to teach, I think, to say, like, this tastes good, I enjoy it, this is how I enjoy it, as opposed to this is not good for me, and so I have to enjoy it behind a closed door.
And then I have guilt and shame over it, and that creates
so it's
bad
like
feelings.
Eating candy in an odd way, but eating candy can almost be modeling healthy behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you look at it, or your ice cream or whatever it is,
And the question is it better to sort of put it out there with very little restriction, or to a lot of parents maybe remove things from the home and say, you can't have this. And I think of this when we were young mothers and went to play groups. And there were certain kids who would be very fixated on some of the snacks because they didn't get them at home, that kind of thing. What do you say to that moderation?
Yeah,
or
that's
not?
tricky because it really does depend on the child and the parent. There are some studies that show that if kids are exposed to something, they're less likely to overeat it and things, in terms of junk food than if they're told they can never have it. But there's also the situation where, sometimes temptation is almost cruel, right? I mean, a big jar of candy in front of a kid and it's there all the time and you're expecting them to self-regulate is maybe not age appropriate depending on the kid. So I think it really depends on the child, but there's no wrong way to do it as long as the child is being taught this is candy, this is a treat, this is ice cream, this is a treat. I would say the same thing about a lot of things we eat. I mean, fried foods, McDonald's. I have a patient right now, I just got this question last week. The grandfather would, she has a 4-year-old, and the grandfather would pick the 4-year-old up from daycare and often take her to McDonald's to get a Happy Meal. And he did that around once a month. And that was sort of their little thing. And Happy Meals are so great. And you get a toy and all this stuff. Well, childcare situation changed. They had a new baby. And now the grandfather picks the children up 3 days a week. And he's taking her to get a Happy Meal 3 days a week. There's a big difference between those two situations. And so now there's an intervention that's needed because eating a Happy Meal once a month, that's probably okay. Eating a Happy Meal 3 days a week, now we're not okay. So, that's where you just have to really look at the big picture and kind of say, okay, Grandpa, we're so happy that you're taking care of our child 3 days a week, and they're so lucky to have grandparent time, but they can't have McDonald's 3 days a week.
That's that's an interesting one too, because I remember my older son staying with my in-laws, and my kids always loved staying with their grandparents if we were away for a couple of days, or that was a total treat. And I can remember one time picking him up, and she told me that he ate Fruit Loops for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she said, I just kept on saying, what do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want this? And he just kept on saying no until I got to Fruit Loops. And I'm like, well, he just figured out that you would keep on going. And but my mom was like this too. It was sort of like a grandparent can spoil their grandchildren, and there's fun in that, and it's special. But to your point, if the frequency is such that maybe it kind of tips the...
Can I push back on this just for a moment?
Please.
Just to because I think it's a really interesting conversation too, and the language around like saying it. You say, eating at McDonald's, whatever it is, 3 times a week is not okay, and like I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. And in many ways, that's not what necessarily I would choose either. Sure. But I'm curious, if you had kind of like a similar situation between, 2 kids and they're reporting this, and one child maybe was like growing on like a curve that you felt was like appropriate, and the other child's growth was kind of like moving in a direction that we didn't want, or there was something else going on with their health. Is the recommendation the same regardless, first of all? Second of all, does it depend what they're getting at McDonald's? Because a lot of times too with kids, you go to McDonald's 3 times a week and they grab the toy out of the Happy Meal and they're not really eating much, right? It's more of just like, oh, we're going and doing this thing. So I do feel like there's some nuance in the I'm going to McDonald's 3 times a week that maybe is not all good or all bad that we could suss out. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't think my recommendation would change based on the child's growth curve. I mean, certainly if we're really worried about a child's weight gain and the pace of their weight gain, we're going to sort of say, are there extra calories going in that we should be addressing?
Investigating further.
But for me, it would more be like an even bigger picture than something that's happening 3 days a week.
Right.
For one meal.
Right.
So I don't think it would change for that. Yeah, you're right. They barely eat the Happy Meal half the time. And I don't know, what are the choices? Chicken nuggets, cheeseburger. Yeah.
Maybe there's apple slices in there.
There is some apple slices. The
Which
French
I've
fries
tasted
now,
and they do not taste good.
No. The French fries now are minuscule, which I love. I mean, you get like 4 fries or something.
Like the baby Happy Meal fries?
Oh, yeah. It's ridiculous. Because I've been known to get a Happy Meal, and I'm like, what is this fries? So I think where it becomes a big struggle is they're eating on the go in the car. The child's eating alone in the back seat, and they get home and she's had dinner and no one else has. And she's had her fill of chicken nuggets or whatever she ate in the back seat, and that was dinner.
Yeah. Or her fill of mealtime. Her mealtime has happened.
Right. She checked the box.
She checked that off.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's that in addition to the preservatives, the salt.
Sure.
Sorry, McDonald's. And I'm picking on McDonald's. It doesn't matter. Any drive-through.
Or, I mean, pointing at too, like not a lot of variety, right? So it's like the same thing that you're eating 3 times a week. That's interesting I really think that's interesting to say that, it's the mealtime that gets checked off the list. Because as you said, one of the first things you said was how important it is to try and get that family time. And who knows, maybe grandpa and granddaughter are having a grand old time, or he parks the car and they sit back there together. We don't know.
Maybe.
But I think it's to the point of it's much more than the actual nutrients in the food. Nutrition is. Yeah.
People always ask me where they should feed their baby. Like, should I feed them in their bouncy seat? Should I feed them in their high chair? Can I hold them and feed them? How do we feel about feeding in car seats? And my answer is always, you need to start from the very beginning, feeding your baby where you sit and eat your meals. I really don't care how they're sitting there, high chair or whatever, but it's very important that from the start, the child associates eating a meal with other people and around a table. And we all eat on the go. I did it today. Protein bar in our car, kind of go. But our preference, I think, would be to sit with the people that we enjoy and enjoy our meals. So I love the concept of, from the very start, encourage that preference to develop.
Well, and we were talking about limiting screens during that time earlier. And the thought that I had, and we got away from it, was you had mentioned to me that it's okay to have toys and maybe something else.
You mean at the dinner table?
Toys.
So other like distractions, entertainment to help engage a child at the table and keep them there.
Yep.
And I thought that was interesting to differentiate that, because I think also you think of a child climbing on the chair and, you were under the table. And I think you also told me, anything that's dangerous, if they're climbing on the chair and they're going to tip back, not so great. But if they're looking under the table, that's really maybe not an issue. Kind of what comments do you have on that to give parents sort of like it's okay to do certain things but not others?
What we're getting at is screens. If you put a screen in front of a child and on the right is the screen and on the left is their food, either they're not going to eat because they're so engrossed in what they're watching they don't even eat at all. They're going to eat mindlessly, i.e. they don't taste it, they don't understand it, and they're definitely going to tune out what else is around them, which hopefully is other family members eating. So that's why I don't really love screens at the table. Now, you can say, well, then why is it okay if they're coloring? Well, for one thing, they are still sort of paying attention to it's not entirely stealing away their attention when they're coloring. The other is that you can do it, but it's pretty hard to color and eat at the same time. Like, you're going to stop and sort of say, oh, I'm going to take some bites here. And then at least you're looking at what you're eating and thinking about what you're eating and things like that. So it may be a little bit hypocritical to allow one over the other. But I think if you need to do those kind of things, toys, coloring, whatever, to just engage your child during the meal, that's fine. We used to play a ton of games at the table. Like I would have a little bowl of Cheerios, and I would have counted the number of Cheerios and be like, how many Cheerios do you think are? And they'd pass it around. And, that was good for 5-10 minutes to just figure out how many Cheerios are in the bowl, and just little games like that. We always did rose and thorn. What was your rose of your day? What was your thorn of your day? Like, we would just I would spend time thinking ahead of time, how am I going to keep these kids into this meal?
And someone gave us a card deck one time that had age-appropriate sort of questions. And that was fun too. It just, when you're kind of thinking like, okay, like I'm not feeling very creative and conversational today, it's a way to create that conversation and keep everybody dialed in.
You have to kind of know the motivation, right? I mean, there are kids, like my daughter loves coloring, loves art. And so her motivation about being at the dinner table a lot of times is like making place cards for the family members, putting that around, kind of organizing what the table looks like. My son would not be motivated to do that, but he's more motivated in, those kind of like quiz questions or conversation. I also feel like it's a really interesting time for parents to decide, and they don't have to do, one or the other all the time, but to say, sometimes should we do kind of like a family style dinner, which I think has like a really interesting component to what happens at dinner. So as opposed to saying, here's your plate of food, you have like a starch, a protein, a vegetable, here you go, to put the larger platters of the food in front of them, which I think if they are, the kids are kind of looking up. They're curious. What are you eating? What's that? That smells good. I want to try that. Or, can I have more of this? Can I help you serve? How do you have table manners at the table? Because I'm going to Jimmy's house for a sleepover next week. And, I want to make sure these are okay. All these kinds of things. I think there's more to engage at a dinner table besides what the food is and what's going on, and taking kind of the pressure off of, we're here at dinner, so we need to just focus on the dinner, and it
kind of gives them the choice, and we all like to make our own choices.
Absolutely.
So that can be liberating in and of itself.
Yeah.
No, and then when they got to be teenagers, I would always tell my husband, how sometimes there are serious topics that you've been wanting to cover with your teenager, or you're slightly displeased with something, or, gee, those college applications still aren't done. Those kind of conversations. I always say to my husband, they may not be talked about at the dinner table. Like,
That's great advice.
I don't want mealtime to become this, I got to go to the table with my parents. They're going to grill me about my math test.
That's really good advice.
So sort of the opposite, where it's important to have meaningful conversations, but maybe some of them are best left for a different time.
Yeah, and I say this to parents all the time who will come and ask me, do they have to take one bite, or they have to eat their vegetable? You want ultimately your kids to want to come to the dinner table, right? So like at 3, they have to, and whatever, but like at 12, you want them to be like, oh, it's dinner time. And that's a happy time where I don't feel pressure. I don't feel like I'm getting grilled about things I don't want to be grilled about. So I think that's just another example of kind of taking pressure off of mealtime, which is really important.
I always sold the one bite. I always tried to get because I had one who I thought he'll never try anything. So I did sort of say just one bite, and if you don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah, and I think that works for plenty of families and plenty of kids. It certainly doesn't work for every family or every kid. Yeah. And I think that just comes back to like knowing your kids and their motivation. And
but then in this moment, I'm thinking, should I have done that? Right? Was I forcing that? Right?
We all think about those, like cringy parent moments. We've all had those that we're like, oh, wait, should we have done it differently? But we all make mistakes or things we wish we had done differently, but it is what it is. And
most of the time they end up liking a lot of things.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're eating it too, that's helpful because you're sort of modeling for them like, hey, this is really yummy. You might like this. That's usually the first step towards that. So I think Emily, you probably know the study. There was a study that it did on average show a child a food, I think it was 18 times before they'll try it.
I've heard this because I know maybe you had talked to Anne about it.
16 was my number.
They had like a Sesame Street episode. But it was like how many times they made like a song out of it. Yeah. And I remember my kids like really enjoying that and being like, oh, I have to try this a certain amount of times. does it work? I don't know. I mean, your taste buds change over the years.
Right.
That's part of it too. And the control or just how I have one who I sit down, she'll just eat whatever I'm eating. It just was never a thing. I have another who, like, if you sit down at the table and you're eating a salad, he needs to gag in the other room. So it's just, I think sometimes they are who they are.
Yeah. And I think in our family that study was, and mentioning the number of times, and again, for us it was 16, was a way of saying, it's okay if you don't like it now, but maybe someday you will.
Right. Don't close the door.
Yeah.
Right.
And just kind of, we all keep open minds. And that's the best we can do. We are going to take a pause here because we have so many more topics to discuss with Dr. Pia Fenimore. So stay tuned for part 2.